Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Turntable on this Wednesday at midday. We're so grateful that you've taken the time to tune into this conversation, this discussion. Thankful for those who are tuned in via the Boulevard website, our YouTube channel, as well as Facebook Live. And if you're tuned in through Facebook Live, would you please consider sharing this particular conversation by clicking that share link, and as well as starting a watch party for others to join us during this very important discussion that we're going to be having today. Today we're going to be talking about mental health, and this is a discussion that I think has come to the forefront right alongside healthcare. We wanted to have the discussion about behavioral health, and want to give this disclaimer. We are not conducting group therapy in this session, but we do want to have a conversation with two professionals who can help navigate us during this discussion on mental health.
We have Dr. Jerlym Porter and Dr. Kim Collins. Why don't you introduce them and let us know about some of their background?
Yes, so Dr. Porter is an assistant member in the Department of Psychology at St. Jude Children's Hospital. Her work focuses on improving the quality of life for youth with sickle cell disease, with an emphasis on the transition to adult care. So welcome, Dr. Porter, to our time. And then as well, we want to welcome Dr. Kimberly Williams-Collins to our time as well, who's a licensed counseling psychologist committed to the ideals of her profession, facilitating growth and development and providing support and assistance. She's currently working through the University of Tennessee Health Science Center and using those skills in the University Health Services Medical Clinic and counseling services. In her current role, she provides therapy for individual students, couples, and groups, participates on the behavioral intervention team, and consults with various colleges and departments, including the University Police and the West Tennessee Forensic Center employees. And so welcome as well, Dr. Collins, to our discussion on today. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. And I might add, they are Boulevard members.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Dr. Collins, we often hear the term mental health, and it often has a negative stigma attached to it, particularly in the African American community. What is mental health, and why is it important to have a dialogue concerning it?
Okay, that's a great question, and you're absolutely right in terms of the stigma that's attached to it. When we talk about mental health, typically we are talking about an ability to function well in life, particularly in terms of psychological, emotional well-being. So someone who is able to recognize their strengths, someone who is able to work productively, someone who maintains healthy relationships and connections. It may even include, for some people, that spiritual component, but it is about an ability to have a quality of life, to be able to function well. And why is it important to talk about it? In our community, when we say mental health, you often hear, I'm not crazy, right? And unfortunately, fortunately, that has changed a great deal, but there's still lots to be done. And so the more that we talk about it, the more that we normalize it, the more people can come to realize that it is part of the human condition. It says nothing negative about us. It's just another issue that we have to deal with at different points in our time, at different points in our lives. And it's just necessary, but it is not a negative thing to have to cope with.
So my question to both of you, as a pastor, one of the things that I've come to understand is my limitations. I am not a trained psychologist, and I'm there to give spiritual guidance, counsel, and pray for people, but I'm not there to do the work of those who are in mental health care and profession. And so what advice would you give, not just to me, but to any faith leader, as they are most times the first point of contact that people, come to during times of distress, to help to break that stigma around mental health care?
Well, I would say that, normalizing the challenges making them realize that we all struggle, we all have challenges and issues, and that sometimes we need additional help. We just need a little bit of help, and it's okay to get that help. You have problems in your marriage, you see a marriage counselor. You are grieving, you see a grief counselor. Why don't you, why can't you see a psychologist if you're having some challenges with how you're coping and dealing with life stressors? So just making it normal, recognizing that this is not due to personal weakness or a character flaw, that this is something that they can get help for, that they don't have to suffer alone. I think that's what's really important for people to understand.
Mhm.
So this COVID pandemic is causing a lot of stress triggers for a lot of people who have never experienced significant hardship in their lives. We know that unemployment is rising, persons are being furloughed. We know that food banks lines, they are very long. People are saying once they get to the front of the line, there's no more food left. How do we cope with this anxiety? And first of all, define anxiety for us. And what are some signs of anxiety for persons who don't know that they're experiencing anxiety?
Okay. So I'll start, Jerlym, and then maybe you'll jump in. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. When we talk about anxiety, typically the most common or typical way is just some nervousness, some unease. It is a part of life. It is something that happens when we don't know what to expect. That is something that occurs for all human beings. When we talk about anxiety in terms of mental health or anxiety disorders, we're talking about something that's more excessive, more persistent. So it might be excessive worry about a particular issue or several issues. It can be, I'm worried about finances, I'm worried about my health, I'm worried about my relationship. So it's excessive to the point of being intrusive. And it is at that point that we would recommend some type of support, some type of help, but just to occasionally feel uncomfortable with an event, or to feel nervous about something that is coming up, or something that you can't quite know exactly what the outcome will be. That is very typical and very normal, and that happens for all of us.
And just to add that some of the signs of anxiety is difficulty concentrating, having racing thoughts, difficulty sleeping, also increased heart rate, increased breathing. Those are things to keep an eye on. And if they become excessive and debilitating, where it is impacting your day-to-day activities, then that's when you need to seek help.
Yeah, I mean, it can, it's much of it's a task now, huge task now, of not only moving out of the house, coming back into the house and being out in the world, that produces a whole nother level of stress. And whether or not you're going to come into contact with someone who will transmit the virus to you, and you want to make sure when you get home, you go through all the protocols you need to go through. So I think there might not be those who have a particular diagnosis as a anxiety disorder, but anything, for a person like me who might just be feeling a little bit anxious.
Well, we're laughing because in this COVID pandemic, we do have to go outside of the house to get essential items, and he may have to go out to prepare for Sunday. And we find ourselves, when we're coming back in the house, we're taking off all our clothes, taking our shoes off, Lysoling our shoes outside, putting our clothes in the wash machine, or if we can't put them in the wash machine right away, we're putting it in the hamper. We are OCD with our kids, making sure that our kids are practicing, the best sanitation measures. And our kids are 7 and 5, and they're looking at us like within a matter of weeks, our whole life has changed. And if we cough, or if we sneeze, or if we wake up in the morning with a little sore throat, we're saying, oh my goodness, do we have corona? Did we bring corona back in the house? How can you or can you provide any advice for persons who have increased anxiety as a result of coronavirus?
So definitely. First of all, I would suggest that some self-compassion would be necessary in this place, in this time. Just acknowledging that it's a difficult time for everyone. We are all dealing with the stress of, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen a month from now? And so to say to oneself that this is a really difficult time, I'm doing the very best I can to cope with this. I am going to be patient with myself. That can be really important, just to, one, not judge yourself harshly for taking those measures to try to protect yourself. And then as long as you are taking those measures, then you also can remind yourself, I'm doing what I can do about this. I can wash my hands. I can use the Lysol. I can try to maintain social distancing. But there are some things that are beyond my control, and I can only do what I can do. I would suggest being compassionate and then being aware of the limits of what we can control would be important.
Yeah. So we spoke of children. We have a 7-year-old, 5-year-old, and one of the things that we've had to deal with is, as our children think about life before the pandemic, and their hopes of what they do once this is over. Etched in my mind is my son saying, "Dad, when the coronavirus is over, can we?" It might be go to a Grizzlies game or something like that. How do we talk to children about this in a way that doesn't send them into a state of undue stress?
Right. And I think a lot of parents are concerned about that. And I think the first thing is to be reassuring, because kids can really, they can kind of sense when things are not right. And if their parents are kind of on edge, they can sense that as well. So to be able to reassure them that you're keeping their home safe, you're keeping them safe, that you're following the guidelines, explain to them in their terms, in ways that they can understand. You don't have to go into the scientific aspect of the COVID-19, but just let them know that there's this virus, it's making people sick. And in order for us to stay healthy and other people to stay healthy, we need to stay inside. We need to wash our hands, turn things into games, see who can wash their hands the best. Try to, help them to feel secure that they're going to be okay, you're going to be okay, their family is going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps someone has tested positive for COVID-19, and of course they will have that worry if they will survive the diagnosis. How is our mental health vital to anyone diagnosed with COVID in order that they may recover?
So we know that there's a mind and body connection. We've heard about that before. We know that having the ability to manage our anxiety and our depression can absolutely impact our ability to heal, to recover from any type of medical concerns. And so in this instance, if we are able to maintain a sense of hopefulness, if we can maintain a sense of optimism that though I've had the diagnosis and though I don't know for sure the outcome, I am going to do all that I can do. I'm going to trust the medical workers that are involved in my treatment, then that can help in terms of the body's ability to respond to the virus and what is going on. Plus, we know our hope comes from the Lord, right? If those are believers. And so we want to not forget that God is in charge still. But I shouldn't be saying that. You should be saying that, Pastor, Lady Bridgett, right?
I want to further that discussion. We'll actually kind of jump to a little bit different discussion. We've heard the term from epidemiologists, our healthcare, governmental agencies of social distancing. And that's something that just didn't bode well for me, just the term itself. I've adopted the term physical distancing because I have a grave concern for one, people who might live alone, who now have had any social interactions kind of taken away from them. And then I'm thinking about the social butterflies, people who look forward to the after work, hangouts with their friends and the weekend. How can we come alongside those people who are our, friends that we know they might not have voiced it, but we know this new norm is not boding well for them? How can we come alongside them?
I think that already that having different platforms like Zoom and FaceTime and Marco Polo to engage people to maintain that contact with each other, encouraging people to reach out to one new person this week, someone that you haven't talked to, so that people will be checking in, especially those that are living alone. I think also a lot of different activities like on Instagram. I feel like Instagram has really helped us with connecting in terms of, you have the DJ D Nice and his quarantine club, and you're sitting there and you're enjoying the music, dancing, whatever, but you're also seeing other people that are like tuning in, and you seeing all these celebrities like, okay, I'm not the only one, trying to deal with this quarantine. But I think, just trying to take advantage of these different technologies can make a difference.
I absolutely agree with that. But also another option would be to look for volunteer opportunities. And I know the goal is to stay inside, but it may be that people are making masks now and providing them to medical workers. And so that could help to give one a sense of purpose, but also know that I am supporting someone who is out there. And so you can feel more connected in that way. It could be a group of people who are, in their separate homes who are sewing masks, and they send them together. So looking for creative ways to feel more connected is really going to be helpful. I've read somewhere that people are adopting pets and fostering more than ever now. And so, gosh, it has to make a difference for the pets and then for the persons as well. So look for other opportunities.
We know several persons who are essential workers. Both of you are back at work, going into the office every day. We know persons within the healthcare profession, firefighters, police officers, pharmacists, and most of them, if not all of them, have stated that in addition to coming home every evening physically tired, they are mentally drained. In fact, there was a story today about a doctor in New York, an ER physician who treated patients of COVID-19. She actually contracted COVID-19, fully recovered, and was back at work. However, she committed suicide. What advice, if any, do you have for our essential workers who are on the front line every day? They have to get up and go to work. Our grocery store workers who have to go to work so that society can survive.
I think it's important for people to take care of themselves, self-care. So making sure that they're eating right, eating healthy meals, eating balanced meals, that they're sleeping, they're getting 7 to 8 hours per day, that they're able to try to get a little exercise in, focusing on the things that they can control, and they can control how they treat their bodies, they can control what they think and what they're bringing into their spirit. Going alongside Dr. Collins, if you're Christian, you got to pray. You got to seek God. You have to use this time to draw close to the Lord and remind yourself whose you are during these times.
Time outdoors can be incredibly helpful as well. And again, I know the goal is to stay inside as much as possible, but sometimes taking a walk and just admiring nature, allowing ourselves to see that, you know, God is larger than us and that life will continue. That also can sort of help to put this in perspective, that while it's extremely difficult now, this will pass. This will not last forever.
And I think alongside, as we talk about essential workers, the conversation is for those who are working from home. For me, this is a totally different ball game. I'm used to getting up, going, and it kind of blurs some lines as to when work ends and when, you know, life at home can begin. And are there any things those who are working at home and this is a new reality for them can do where it might be a little bit taxing on them mentally and emotionally to now have to work from home and kind of feel okay with, hey, I'm cutting off at 5 o'clock?
I think having a schedule, having a start time and an end time, I'm cutting off. I deserve to have some time that is not work related. I need to have that time in order to be able to show up the next day to do work. It's necessary. So having that schedule and communicating that with whomever you might need to, you know, maybe supervisors aren't quite recognizing that, you know, I need to have a lunch hour. And so I'm going to take my lunch from 1 to 2. I won't be available or I won't be responding to emails during that time. Taking frequent breaks would be really important. Stand up and stretch, you know, do some yoga poses. Like I said earlier, step outside for a few minutes. We cannot work solely. We need to have balance in our lives. And that includes the social connection that you mentioned earlier, the spirituality. We need to recognize that we are, you know, we're not automatons. We're not only created for work.
Grief is real in any season. However, in this season, grief has taken on a whole new different process.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that family members are not permitted to go to the hospital to visit a loved one, whether or not they have COVID. They are just encouraging family members not to come to the hospital, or funerals have limits to how many people can be in attendance, and eulogies are being done via video conference. And for our culture, we like to embrace people when they grieve. We like to have a repast after the repast, you know, when we go to somebody's house after the funeral and we all get together and we're grieving with that person. But now they are encouraging us not to practice in our normal stages of grief as it relates to being present with someone who is mourning. What advice would you give someone who is mourning, who is not able to have the physical presence of a large family or friends to be with them during this season?
I think that's just very challenging. I would say to that person to talk to others who bring comfort to them, to reach out to people that may understand what they're going through. There's different support groups and grief groups that are very specific to what is going on now. I think trying to find meaning in the experience is helpful. Holding on to the memories and making meaning out of those memories in maybe a tangible way could be helpful. I know a lot of people are doing like video testimony or eulogies, and they're giving their condolences via video. I think we just have to learn to be creative and flexible in this time, but I think nothing beats having that supportive person that you can turn to and talk to. So we have to make sure that we reach out to each other.
Absolutely. And just like we have the Zoom music parties and the DJing, you know, we can have the Zoom sort of honoring experience where people come and talk about what it was like, you know, stories about that person and their interactions with that person. You know, that can be the more public way, but also it can be very private. One could choose to do something that really reminds them of a time and experience with that particular person. It might be reading a poem. It might be drawing some picture. I mean, it can be very meaningful to include others, but whatever is meaningful in terms of recognizing and honoring that person, that is what works. So it may not involve others. It might be just sitting, thinking about that person, recognizing, you know, the love and the concern, and knowing that right now it hurts to not have them here, but appreciating the time that you had with them.
Yeah. As we kind of think about family, and I'm going back to the home, one of the things she doesn't really talk about a lot is her work as a prosecutor in New York in special victims units, dealing with domestic violence cases. And, you know, whereas for us, I believe this has been a season where we've been able to redeem some time because I'm home now more than I've ever been, and I'm enjoying this time because we're getting able to spend time together. But for some, this dynamic of sheltering in place has brought some stress, some tension, and for some, a pressure cooker. How can families maintain safe and healthy environments?
So you're right. I mean, domestic violence, interpersonal violence definitely has been on the rise. And I think within the home, as much as possible, creating some distance. So it might be, if this person is in, you know, the TV room, then I'll go to the bedroom, and we will allow ourselves to have some alone time, some separate time where, you know, I know that person may be very stressed and irritable, and I won't have to respond to what they're saying or doing because I've taken myself out of that situation. It also could be engaging in some of the things that we talked about: exercise, meditation, connecting with friends and family can help allow the individuals to relieve some of that stress. And then respect as much as possible, making sure that we are treating our family members as well as we would treat someone that we work with, someone that we see at church, being kind and respectful, and sort of challenging ourselves to extend grace to them, just like we would want grace extended to us. Though I do understand when we talk about domestic violence, there are many more factors at play, but just in general, it's trying to be the best person that we can as we interact with others.
And just to add that if the person feels like they are in grave danger, that to make sure they have the number for the closest shelter. They call the police if they're in extreme danger. There's also the national hotline for domestic violence that can help with creating a safety plan as well.
And let me also say that there is no excuse for physical abuse.
Right.
So in this season, if someone is being physically abused, we're not going to blame it on COVID-19 and the stress that, oh, they lost their job or they may be sick. There is never an excuse for physical abuse. So if you are in an environment where you are being physically abused, contact the authority. While we should be engaging in physical distancing, distance yourself from the person that is causing you physical harm, because God's intention is not for you to be in a household, a marriage, or a relationship where you are being physically abused or verbally abused. And there's just no excuse for it. So we do want to put that out there.
Yeah.
Physically distance yourself from someone who is placing their hands on you, and that goes both ways.
Yeah, and I think just add to that, if you feel, my grandfather said this to my father before he married my mom, and he said to her, if you ever think about hitting her, bring her home. But I think the point of what he was saying is, if you ever get to that point, remove yourself from the situation. And so I think it does mean that there needs to be some restraint, exercise, and as you mentioned, grace given during these times. We want to ask you all, not speculatively, so don't, I'm not asking you to be a prophet or see into the future, but if you could speak to, do you all foresee, and I don't even know if this is possible, but like a communal post-traumatic stress that people will be living with post COVID-19?
So we know that post-traumatic stress is precipitated by something that is perceived as a trauma by the individual. And so to the extent that COVID-19 and its repercussions causes trauma for individuals, absolutely, there could be post-COVID PTSD. And what I think you're doing here in terms of sharing resources and encouraging people to engage in self-care and to seek help, this is one way to help to try to mitigate some of that repercussions from the trauma of COVID. But definitely, unfortunately, I think we will see that.
I know, I wonder as well, not to make light, but I think about kids growing up through this, and are they going to grow up hoarding toilet paper? Toilet paper and hand sanitizer and paper towels. Are they going to be learning how to make masks? And I mean, I do wonder, I think about people that say, oh, my parents grew up in the Great Depression and how they kind of held on and hoarded things. I wonder if there's going to be an element of that because of COVID-19.
I think so. Our parents grew up during the civil rights era. And just because of some of the things that they experienced during that civil rights era, I can still see some of their reactions to things that occur now. And it's because how they grew up. And we have seen our children, we may be outside in the yard playing with Josiah and Savannah, and a friend of theirs from school may come by riding their bike or walking with their family. And Josiah was so quick to say, you can't come in my yard. It's Corona. And I don't want you to give it to me. Sort of insinuating that his friend had it. And of course, we have told them no one can come in our yard. We can't do any more play dates. But our children, they are living through this, but I think they will carry this as a result for the rest of their lives, no matter how young they are. My 5-year-old, when we step out of the house, she wants to know, where is my mask? I'm not sure if it's because of COVID-19 or she just likes the fact that she has a pretty pink mask that we had made for her. But there may be some persons who want to seek some mental health assistance in this time period, but they are quite frightened to even go out of their house to see a therapist. What options and resources are available for them?
So many providers are using telehealth now. So just like we're doing the remote video conferencing, this very much is available to a lot of providers are using teleconferencing as a way to provide services. And of course, that could include for some people who maybe don't have access to Wi-Fi or the different apps, phone contact is a way of receiving some of the services and the support that individuals might need.
And I'll just also add that for those of the viewers that are in the Mid-South area, that Le Bonheur, the website, they have a COVID-19 resources page for parents.
Mm-hmm.
This is great.
Well, I just wanted to add, UTHSC also has a web page with COVID resources. I should have thought of that, sorry.
And we will provide some resources at the end of this on the screen for Le Bonheur and UT, as well as the domestic violence hotline and some other resources. But we think that this conversation is so important and necessary because research shows that 1 in 5 persons may experience some mental health challenges or issues in their lifetime. And during a time like this, that number increases to 1 in 2 persons are at risk of developing some mental health challenges. So we want to let the community know that this is not a stigma, that there is normalcy to this, to seek professional help. Often the first stop for most people is their pastor or their priest to try to sort some issues out, which is not something bad. It is always good to talk to your pastor or your spiritual leader, but we do want to encourage you to seek that professional help.
Yeah, we are certainly not the church that's going to tell you to pray it away. I believe God has invested and gifted persons like yourselves to help to walk with people, counsel them, and provide therapy for them during those difficult moments in life. And so we thank God for you all, as I say, accepting the call to enter into this particular field, because it's really helping lots of people to navigate through those difficult moments that they find themselves in life. And so any closing words from either of you to just speak to those who are viewing today as it relates to their mental health or the overarching topic of mental health on today?
We won't both jump in, right? So I would just encourage people to be kind and compassionate to themselves. Know that this is an incredibly difficult time for us all, and we are all trying to do the very best that we can. Try to engage in those behaviors that are healthy and helpful. Exercise, connection, sleep, and nutrition. These are things that Dr. Porter mentioned. And to just remember that we will get through this. This will not last always. And there have been difficult times in their lives that they've already made it through. They can also know that they'll make it through this.
Yes.
And I totally agree with that, to be kind to yourself, not put too much stress on yourself, think that you're supposed to do things a certain way during COVID-19, but just do the best that you can. And then just to remember that this is not going to last always, and that we're going to get to the other side.
Yes.
We're coming out of this wilderness experience.
Yes.
That's right.
But while we're in it, we have to just be convinced that we will get through it, but we have to make the best of it. I found myself, I'll speak for myself, I was guilty of watching the news 24/7. And my kids would go to sleep at night, my husband would go to sleep at night, and I would stay up watching the news till 4 o'clock in the morning just to see if there was any updates. So last week, I made it my intention to watch some comedy. If I was going to watch a movie, it wasn't going to be a documentary about a pandemic, about an outbreak. It was actually going to be a movie where I can laugh and release. I had to tell my mom, because I know countless people in New York that have this. I just said, I just need a break. She said, you aren't answering your phone. I said, because every time you call, you're telling me somebody else has it or somebody else has passed away, and I need a break. So turn the TV off. If you just want to go outside and walk, or if you do turn the TV on, watch something humorous. Find laughter in this, because while you're in this wilderness experience, God is not promising us that we're going to come out next week, but he is saying, I'll be with you while you're in it. And you just have to make your mind up that you're going to survive it and get through it.
Yes.
Pass the plate after.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed this conversation. The goal of the turntable is just to have some real, relevant, relatable conversations about what we're all experiencing, understanding that we're in this together. So thank you for being in this conversation with us today.
Thank you so much. And before we log off, we're going to pray. We want to let everybody know who tuned in on today. If you want to stay connected to the number of things that are still happening in the life of our ministry, send an email to info@theboulevard.org. That will subscribe you to our Mississippi Boulevard e-blast. And then as well, on Sunday mornings, 10:30 a.m., you can catch us at Facebook Live. You can catch us on the Boulevard YouTube channel or at our website. And if you stay tuned to social media this week, we might have a new opportunity on Sundays that we want to invite you to as well. Next week on the turntable, we're going to be talking about all things money. This is a season that is not only a health crisis, but an economic crisis as well. And so we're bringing on a financial advisor who can help to answer some of the questions that many of us are having. Let's have a word of prayer as we log off today. Eternal and gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity to converse about those things that are most pressing, that are at the forefront of our minds. You've created us not only as spirits and have a soul and a body, but you have created us with a mind. I thank you, O Lord God, for these two women of God, for their work in the mental health care field. And I pray your continued blessings upon them, particularly during this time where the demands are increasingly great. I pray for anyone who might be viewing today, who might be feeling a sense of isolation or even depression or feeling some other mental challenge, that they would know that they're not in it alone, and that in addition to reaching out to those in their faith community, they would reach out to those who are mental health care professionals, and that they might not feel any sense of shame or guilt about doing so. I pray, Lord God, that during this season, you would continue to work and walk with us through this wilderness experience. And we know ultimately that you have it under control, that you will work all things together for our good and for your glory. And so we praise you, we thank you, we honor you, and we ask all of these things in the name of the one who is the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen and amen.
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 Thank you all for being on with us. Thank you all for streaming with us today. Hope to see you Sunday for online worship. God bless you. God keep you.
Take care.